Hi, my name is Caroline Wong, and I could not be more delighted than to introduce you to the very first episode of a brand new podcast called the AI Security Edge. Joining me today is my very good friend and colleague, Daniel Miessler. If you want to look up Daniel, and you should, you can find all the details that you need to know about him. When I think of Daniel, I think about three things. Thing one, Daniel might be the single deepest thinker in our industry. Thing two, Daniel is extremely self-aware, particularly of the fact that he is a human, that I'm a human. And thing three, I think he's really good at humaning. Maybe that's an unusual way to introduce a podcast guest, but it is simply the truth. And I'm here to speak the truth. On this podcast, we're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about cybersecurity. We're going to talk about how AI is changing cybersecurity. What are the ways in which cybersecurity makes life easier for attackers and harder for defenders? And what are the ways in which AI makes life better for information security professionals? And how does it make it harder? That's what we're talking about. Daniel, welcome. And thank you so much for being here with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for that kind intro. I've never had an intro like that. That was very nice of you.
You're so welcome. Daniel, I'd love to start out with, if you could talk to us about your current favorite way to use AI.
Yeah. So a lot of people have like a favorite model. So an Anthropic model or ChatGPT or OpenAI or something. And the way that I think of interacting with AI is that we have a integration problem and not a capabilities problem. So what that means to me is like the AI is already amazing, right? All the different models are great. They're good for different things, depending on how you use them, different use cases. But for me, the problem is we, like you said, we're humans. We have human problems. We have things we want to do with AI. And the problem is when you have a task that needs to be done, the question isn't, is there an AI that can do this well? Because the answer is always yes. The question is, how quickly can I get this problem into AI and get the answer back in a usable way within my workflow of life? So a lot of what I've been working on, I came up with this project called Fabric back in, I guess it was right in the beginning of 24, but it's all about this integration. It happens to be command line, so it's a little bit difficult for some people to get into, but there's also a GUI, so that helps. But the whole point of that was to have a problem set, which you could bring into that tool and get the problem solved and then go back to your regular life. So that being said, at the end of last year, I was working on my life optimization workflow, and I decided to double down on a tool called Raycast, which is a Mac-based tool. It's like the replacement for Spotlight, basically, and also the replacement for, excuse me, a previous tool called Alfred. And so what it is it's basically an application launcher, which you open with command space, and it just pops up this thing. But what you can do is you can basically bring all of your operating system functions like into that tool. So you could take screenshots, you can search for your screenshots, you can invoke all sorts of different programs, you can like adjust all the screens on your computer. You could search for things, you could open things. And what I did was I just started watching like tens of hours of videos on this thing. And I got most of my life things that I do in my computer, calendaring, email, everything, all into this one tool. So the tagline for this tool is amazing. And by the way, it's free. So I'm not like affiliated. I'm selling an idea, not the particular product. But the tagline for this tool is action at the speed of thought. So the idea is you basically command space and you just think, and your fingers essentially invoke this thing, whether that's launching an appointment or whatever. Now, the craziest thing, the sickest thing about this is that it is to get to your question, it is my on-ramp into AI. So I can do command space, and then I could type anything. If I press enter with my pinky, it's a Google search. So check this out. I haven't seen the Google website in years. I don't go to the Google website. I used to just do a command L inside of my browser and go and then search. Yeah, because that'll take you to your URL bar. But now I don't even do that because that requires that I'm in the browser. Now I could be anywhere on my thing. I do command space. I start typing. I've just done a search. If I do P space, that's a perplexity search. So that's an AI search. But watch this. If I just start typing any query, what is Caroline Wong working on these days? Oh, she started a new podcast. You should go check it out. If I do option, so if my left thumb goes down to option and then I press enter, it calls my AI, the AI that I want to use. It does a search with, in this case, Sonnet 3.5, which is part of Anthropic. It does a search there, but Raycast also does a live search. So it will literally go crawl social media, it'll crawl your website and everything, and it will find that you just launched a new podcast. It will say, Caroline is working on a new podcast. It just launched and there's this many episodes out and she is working on solving these problems. So not only did you invoke AI to get you the best answer and the best formulation of the answer, but it's also live. It's a live lookup. And you did not go to any website. You did not open Claude or Anthropic or ChatGPT, any of it. Now, here's what's really, really crazy. So when you're on a website, you can invoke the same thing, command space, and you could just ask a question about the web page, and it will answer about the web page. And if you do command J, you actually can have a conversation about the web page. So it's almost like you're asking the author questions, and the chat interaction is actually reaching out and interacting with the content. And if you ask something that's not on the page, it'll go out and search. So long story short, this is a completely different way of interacting with AI by just doing it directly and not through a tool. You're just thinking of an answer you want, and you just on-ramp instantly. And by the way, you could change the AI that you're using. You could use any model that you want on the back end, but you have this really smooth instant interface instead of this clunky 1 or 2 steps, because friction is the enemy.
Friction is the enemy.
Yeah.
Gosh, Daniel, I am kind of a visual thinker. And when I heard you telling me about this, what I picture is like you like operating like an enormous robot that you're like sitting in, and it's just like the 2025 version of that. I think a lot about sort of analog life, call it pre-computing, and our modern lives that we live today. And I think that what's happening is what's been invisible inside of our heads has been taking form via computing. And it's also been growing. And, it's like, you went from having one of those grabby tools to like an arm. And so That's extraordinary. I'm so happy to hear about it. Um, I want to kind of pivot to the second theme of our conversation today, which is we're talking about AI and cybersecurity. I think it's overly simplistic to say there are attackers and defenders, but for the sake of a 20 or 30-minute podcast, let's just go with that model.
Sure.
How is AI helping attackers?
Yeah, I would say that I guess the most encompassing way to think about that is it's taking things that they have always wished they could do and making them possible. And the way I think about this is I've got this framework I'm working on. I would actually love to collaborate with you on it. It's called the Attacker Capabilities Framework. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting it down a list of everything that an attacker wishes they could do. And I'm thinking specifically of attack surface mapping. I'm thinking of VIP or employee dossier creation, spear phishing creation, continuous attack surface monitoring. So like you're getting asset updates of the target, and then automated attacks on top of that. So now you're doing enumeration, but now you find all the stuff. Now you're doing the actual attacks. Then you're doing a ransomware campaign or extortion or whatever it is. So this is a whole life cycle of things that need to be done. And so now you're this attacker and let's say you've got 5 employees, or let's say you've got 100 employees, and they have various skill levels or whatever. And your TAM, let's call it that, is like a country. Like you're trying to attack Canada, or you're trying to attack the United States, or the entire West, or whatever your target market is. The question is, how many companies can you actually do attack surface gathering on, right? How quickly can you get a full asset map of everything they own, all their domains, all their websites, find all their vulnerabilities, and knowing that that will be expired tomorrow, right? It'll be kind of old. It'll start getting stale the moment you gather it. Well, with AI, and especially going into 25 with agents rising up and actually getting quite good, more and more things on this list in this attacker capabilities framework, they start to go from red X to green check mark. Okay, because so watch this. Like, we already know that we can do this attack surface map with an extremely high skilled person who spends 3 hours, right? We know that's true. Problem is there's a cost associated with it because this is the best tester there. They're the best tester. They're the founder of this attacking organization. They're the best at OSINT. They're the best at all this. They wrote all these tools. So that has a cost. That costs them 3 hours, not counting the tools that they had to make, right? So the cost is very high. And the repeatability is very low, right? So you add the agents in 2025, and suddenly that cost goes down by not a percentage, but factors of 10, right? So now it costs 10 cents to keep this updated. And now instead of that one company, guess what? They launched it on 5,000 companies at the same time. Okay, now you move to the next step. Now let's do enumeration. Now let's find every single employee inside of the company. How long did that take? That was also that very skilled person using a different set of skills to find these people, create a dossier on them. Again, the FSB can do this, CIA can do this, but can this 100-person company do it? Not likely. Well, now they can. So what you're doing is you're taking attackers in a 10-person company, in a 100-person company. You are turning them into an attacking organization that is 5 levels smarter than them, who is now a 20,000-person company. And the cost of doing every single task is divided by like 100 or divided by 1,000. So that's what it's doing to attackers.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. There
Yep.
is just so much in there. What does an attacker want to do? And how can they do it in a fraction of the time, in orders of magnitude less of the time, and really maximize the impact of whatever limited resources they have? I mean, that sounds like a doomsday scenario, or depending on like, whose side you're on, maybe like very revolutionary.
Really exciting and really, lucrative.
Yeah.
Exactly. What's interesting, which is a theme for AI in general, what it does is it takes people who have really good ideas and it magnifies them. It turns them into actual superheroes, which means if you have this really smart attacker in some country somewhere, and they're like, I have the perfect attack methodology. I only have 3 people. But if I could just build all this tech, like if I had time to actually write out all this tech, I would become a criminal mastermind. But I can't because it's 2022 and real AI hasn't come out yet. So I am this 3-person org. So I'm doing a lot of damage, but only to a tiny number of companies. That person is now going to become like Lex Luthor. That person is going to have a 20,000 person company with massive scale and massive capability at low cost.
There's a total shakeup of the power distribution.
Yes.
And power relies so much less on capacity of human time and number of humans and level of skill of those number of humans.
Yes. It's more about the quality of the idea and your ability to explain that idea to AI. And the better the AI gets, the worse your explanation actually has to be. Because eventually you'll be like, yeah, and I guess we need to do OSINT. And it's like, oh, you mean you need to do OSINT followed by enumeration? And it's like, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. And so it just starts building out these pieces. And yeah, it's really extraordinary. It is quite frightening, quite frightening.
Daniel, we are starting this particular bit of the conversation with an assumption that you've got an attacker and that person is brilliant. Can a person who's not brilliant do the same thing?
They can. It depends on what their skills are. If their skill is that they're like really disciplined and smart about how to get resources, they will essentially have the same capabilities as the super brilliant attacker, because what they will do is just find that person and collaborate, or they will find that tech stack and bring it over. They don't have to invent it. The person who won't do well is someone who thinks they're brilliant and isn't, and just isn't very disciplined, because they will stay with bad tech. They'll stay at a small scale. But unfortunately, the way the attacker ecosystem works, as you know, is like it's very Adam Smithy in the sense that like there's whole ecosystems of economy where it's like, hey, I'm really good at getting access, not really good at pivoting once we're inside. So I use a pivoting network.
Yeah.
And you have like these brokers, and it's just like it finds the best service for doing that particular task. So basically committed attackers, even if they're not even programmers, they're going to be able to maximize their capabilities.
Yeah. You know, this ties beautifully into a concept that I touched on in your introduction, which is this concept of self-awareness. You know, to the extent that we can be self-aware of ourselves, recognize what our strengths and not strengths are, and then find compensation for our not
Yeah.
strengths, find folks whose superpower is my weakness, and collaborate
Yes.
with that either individual or function or blob.
Hmm.
Well, that's good and terrifying, you know? And what I want is I want those attackers to have the same values as me. And I want them to have the same objectives as me, which is
Right.
delving a little bit into, you know, the not quite rightness of this model of attackers and defenders. But again, for simplicity, we're going to go for that. And so how does it work on the flip side for a cybersecurity professional that is faced with that level of power on the attacker side? What do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's lots of ways to answer that, but I think the simplest way that I'm trying to view this is to simply start with the attacker capabilities framework and just say, okay, well, lots of different things I could do, but let's just start with that capabilities framework. Let's just understand that that is what is coming for me. And let's do that. Let's us get really, really good at that. So we point it at ourselves. So essentially, both groups need to build this to be the best that they can be. The good news is that if a defender builds this and it's anywhere near as good as the attacker's version, the defender will win. And the reason is they have all the internal data. They have direct access to AWS. They have direct access to all the assets. So their AI context is just better because both the attacker and the defender are working off this central concept, which is so powerful in this AI thing. I kind of think AI context is kind of like the center. I think it replaces all software, essentially. So essentially, AI context is the state of the thing that you care about, the state of the human, the state of the company, the state of the AWS infrastructure. So the question is, how quickly can you gather state and how quickly can you update it? And then you ask that thing questions, and then you take actions based on the answers to the questions. And if you look at the attacker capabilities framework, that's all it is. You're gathering state of your target. You're asking questions of what's vulnerable. Based on the answer that comes back, you take an action. So it's just this cycle. And the question is, how good is your state? How much does your model of this thing match the actual thing? So, so the way to think about this as a defender is to say, I need my model of reality to be better than the attacker's model. It needs to be more updated faster, because it comes down to this. The developer gets access. They're super excited. They're very junior. I'm not sure why they got hired, but they're like, hey, the CEO would be really impressed if I started this new product. I'm going to grab a copy of the production data. I'm going to bring it over into this environment. I'm going to spin up this box. Oh, the phone rang. I'm going to go answer this phone. Oh, it turns out I've got to take my kids to school, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, they just spun up that box. It's got a copy of the production data on it. It's listening on the Postgres port. That's an open port with the database of the company data facing the internet, and they just ran off and did something else. So the timer just started. So here's the question. This automated AI, two worlds, the defender world and the attacker world, they are racing to find that open port and exploit it. So the question is the defender AI system as fast and as good as the attacker one, because we're both racing to the same thing?
Wow. 20 years ago, folks used to say and maybe believe that, a defender has limited resources, limited time. You know, they have to protect against every possible attack. An attacker has maybe infinite resources, infinite time in a certain way, and they only have to find one that works. And so there was this concept of like severe asymmetry.
Yeah.
Now it seems like we've got sort of like equal capabilities. Attacker capabilities framework, attacker capabilities framework. Is my context better? Is my context better? Who can figure that out faster? And shadow IT maybe is like what makes the difference, right? The fact that technology, and I think you and I happen to have more of a specialization in software, and this pro and con of software being so malleable, so fast to fix, that culturally devs thrive on doing whatever they want, whenever they want.
Yes.
And the cybersecurity professional's job to try and just like keep their picture accurate, and get their model to match as fast as they can. And the same thing on the other side.
Yes.
Gosh, I'm so excited to see where this goes. I am so excited to have had all of these different bits of my brain just started racing in different directions thanks to my conversation with you today. Daniel, thank you. Thank you for your generosity. For folks who are not yet subscribed to UL Unsupervised Learning, do yourself an incredible favor. Sign up right now. I often get asked the question, like, Caroline, how do you keep up to date with stuff? And number one thing I say, Daniel Miessler's Unsupervised Learning. If you are a reading type, you can get emails. If you are a listening or watching type, there are podcasts and YouTube videos. Daniel, thank you. What a pleasure this has been.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.